Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: the US and Iran are dangerously close to confrontation in the Middle East. Here's where they both operate. New Zealand's huge shift in the Middle East. Oil, aid, airspace? Arab leaders' options on Gaza conflict. China says it's working to de-escalate tensions in the Red Sea that have upended global trade. UN, UK push Israel on role of two-state solution in ending Gaza war. The US and Iran are dangerously close to confrontation in the Middle East. Here's where they both operate. CNN. The war between Israel and Hamas has the potential to escalate into a wider conflict involving regional and world powers. The fighting has largely been between Iran-backed militias and the US, Israel, and its allies. However, recent direct intervention by both Iran and the US has raised concerns that the proxy conflict between the two countries could turn into a direct one. Iran has spent decades building a network of anti-Western and anti-Israel militias in the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and various Shiite militias in Iraq. The US, which has been trying to pivot away from the Middle East, finds itself drawn back into the region due to the conflict. The US has a significant military presence in the region and has strengthened its military posture since the war began. In Lebanon, Iran-backed Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel and has an estimated 150,000 to 200,000 missiles. In Iraq, Iran wields influence over several Shiite militias, including Kataib Hezbollah, Harakat al-Najaba, and Kataib Sayyid al-Shahada. Iran-backed groups have carried out attacks against US forces in Iraq, to which the US has retaliated with airstrikes. In Syria, Iran has a direct presence through its Quds Force, which deployed to back the regime of Bashar al-Assad. The US has 800 forces in Syria as part of its ongoing mission to defeat ISIS. In Yemen, the Houthi rebels, who are backed by Iran, have been stepping up their strikes on ships in the Red Sea. The US has been striking Houthi targets from warships stationed off Yemen's coast. In the Gaza Strip, Iran has built closer ties with Hamas, which launched an attack on Israel on October 7. Israel is the largest recipient of US military aid, and the US has contributed over $130 billion in assistance since the country's founding. Gulf Arab states and Turkey are also vulnerable to attacks by Iran-linked groups and host significant deployments of US troops. As tensions rise in the region, the prospects of a confrontation between Iran and the US become more likely. Both sides have conducted military operations since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, and the direct intervention of both Iran and the US heightens fears of a direct conflict between the two powers. New Zealand's huge shift in the Middle East. Diplomat. New Zealand has announced that it will deploy troops to support the US-led military response to the attacks on commercial shipping from the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, stated that this move was not unusual for New Zealand, and that the country has a history of supporting maritime security in the Middle East. New Zealand has traditionally focused its contribution on criminal activities such as piracy and smuggling. The country's contribution is expected to be intelligence-related and support precision targeting in future airstrikes. The decision to support the military response to the Houthi attacks represents a significant shift in New Zealand's independent foreign policy, particularly given the country's history of opposing the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. While New Zealand's efforts are expected to be small, the move is seen as a significant departure from the country's traditional peacekeeping efforts. Oil, aid, airspace? Arab leaders' options on Gaza conflict. Deutsche Welle. Arab states face a conundrum when it comes to how they should react to the current conflict in Gaza. On one hand, they want to show support for the Palestinians and their own angry publics, but on the other hand they do not want to jeopardize relations with the US or destabilize their own regimes. One option that has been suggested is the use of an oil embargo, similar to the one imposed in the 1970s. However, this idea has been quickly dismissed, with officials from Saudi Arabia rejecting it outright. A global oil embargo would lead to direct confrontation with the US and other Western nations, and is therefore unlikely. Arab leaders are under increasing pressure to do something about the conflict, but there is unlikely to be any truly coordinated or tangible response from Arab states. The threat of an end to the normalization of relations between Israel and Arab states is being pushed hardest, with an Arab-sponsored peace plan recently proposed that ties improved Israeli-Saudi ties to progress towards a Palestinian state. China says it's working to de-escalate tensions in the Red Sea that have upended global trade. Associated Press. China has expressed concern over the tensions in the Red Sea, which have disrupted global trade by causing many shippers to avoid the Suez Canal. China has been in close communication with all parties involved and has made efforts to de-escalate the situation. The country has called for a halt to the harassment and attacks on civilian ships and has urged all relevant parties to ensure the safety and security of the Red Sea route. The Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have launched at least 34 attacks on shipping in the region since November. UN, UK push Israel on role of two-state solution in ending Gaza war. Al Jazeera. The United Nations, UN, and the United Kingdom have both emphasized that a two-state solution is key to achieving peace in the Israel-Palestine conflict. The UK's Foreign Minister, David Cameron, has said he will highlight Britain's support for a two-state solution during a trip to the Middle East. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called Israel's rejection of a two-state solution unacceptable and warned that denying Palestinian statehood could prolong the conflict. The US and the European Union have also called for a two-state solution, with the EU's top diplomat saying that Israel's plan to destroy Hamas in Gaza is not working. How Red Sea crisis raises inflation, supply chain worries anew. Bloomberg. Yemen's Houthi rebels have caused the biggest disruption to global trade since the COVID-19 pandemic by attacking ships in the Red Sea. The attacks, which have included firing drones and missiles, have prompted shipping companies to reroute container, oil, and natural gas traffic around the southern tip of Africa, leading to increased costs and concerns about inflation and supply chain snarls. The Houthis have said they are acting in solidarity with the Palestinians amid the war between Israel and Hamas. The attacks have led to US and UK airstrikes on Yemen and increased insurance costs for ship operators. Fighting in Gaza leaves hundreds of patients stranded in main hospital. South China Morning Post. Israeli forces have been battling Palestinian militants near the main hospital in Gaza's second-largest city, Khan Yunis. The UN has said that the area is home to 88,000 Palestinians and has been hosting another 425,000 displaced by fighting elsewhere. Médecins Sans Frontières has said that its staff is trapped inside Nasser Hospital with 850 patients and thousands of displaced people as the surrounding roads are inaccessible or too dangerous. Nasser Hospital is one of only 2 hospitals in southern Gaza that can still treat critically ill patients. The Israeli military has said that its forces are battling militants inside Khan Yunis after completing their encirclement of the city. The military has also targeted suspected militants in central and northern Gaza. At least 210 Palestinians were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total death toll from the war to 25,700, according to Gaza's health ministry. Another 386 Palestinians were wounded over the past day, bringing the total to 63,740 and adding more strain to already overwhelmed hospitals, the ministry said. UN officials have expressed concerns that even more people could die from disease, with at least 1/4 of the population facing starvation. Live updates: patients stuck in Khan Yunis main hospital as Israel battles militants in the city. Associated Press. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron is visiting the Middle East this week to call for an urgent humanitarian pause in Gaza. Cameron will meet with regional leaders and raise concerns about the high number of civilian casualties. He will also push for water and electricity to be restored to Gaza and for more crossing points to enable aid deliveries. Cameron believes that an immediate pause is necessary to get aid in and hostages out, and that a permanent ceasefire would require Hamas to relinquish control in Gaza and for the Palestinian Authority to return to the enclave. Israel, Hamas still distant on hostage deal as U.S. envoy heads to region. Washington Post. Brett McGurk, the top National Security Council official on the Middle East, is heading to Qatar to discuss the release of Hamas-held hostages. McGurk's trip comes as fighting intensifies around the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis, where top Hamas commanders are believed to be located. However, U.S. officials say that there is little progress to report regarding the release of the hostages so far. U.S. carries out new strikes on Houthi missiles in Yemen, Iraq sites. Al Jazeera. The U.S. military has launched strikes in Yemen and Iraq targeting Iran-backed groups that it says were responsible for missile and drone attacks on U.S. troops. The strikes in Yemen targeted Houthi anti-ship missiles and facilities. The U.S. military's Central Command said that the missiles posed an imminent threat to merchant vessels and U.S. Navy ships in the region. In Iraq, the U.S. targeted sites used by Iran-backed armed groups in response to recent attacks on U.S. personnel. The strikes in Iraq have been condemned by the country's government, which said they undermined Iraq's sovereignty and harmed security and stability. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six from the Sixth Dimension, here to bring you the latest news from around the world. Today, we focused on the escalating tensions in the Middle East between the US and Iran, as well as the involvement of other countries in the region. Let's dive into the analysis. First, we discussed the dangerous proximity between the US and Iran in the Middle East. Both countries have been engaged in a proxy conflict through their respective allies, but recent direct interventions by Iran and the US have raised concerns of a direct confrontation. Iran has been building a network of anti-Western and anti-Israel militias in the region, while the US finds itself drawn back into the region due to the ongoing conflict. Next, we examined New Zealand's surprising shift in its Middle East policy. The country has announced its deployment of troops to support the US-led military response to attacks on commercial shipping by Houthi rebels in Yemen. This move represents a significant departure from New Zealand's traditional peacekeeping efforts and highlights its willingness to support maritime security in the region. We then looked at the conundrum faced by Arab states in responding to the conflict in Gaza. While they want to show support for the Palestinians, they also do not want to jeopardize relations with the US or destabilize their own regimes. The idea of an oil embargo to pressure Israel was quickly dismissed, as it would lead to confrontation with the US and other Western nations. Arab leaders are under increasing pressure to take action, but a coordinated response seems unlikely at this point. China has also expressed concern over the tensions in the Red Sea, which have disrupted global trade. The country has been working to de-escalate the situation and has called for the safety and security of the Red Sea route. The attacks by Houthi rebels have caused major disruptions to shipping, leading to increased costs and concerns about inflation and supply chain issues. The United Nations and the United Kingdom have both emphasized the importance of a two-state solution in achieving peace in the Israel-Palestine conflict. The rejection of a two-state solution by Israel has been deemed unacceptable by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who warned that denying Palestinian statehood could prolong the conflict. Lastly, we discussed the dire situation in Gaza, where Israeli forces have been battling Palestinian militants near a major hospital. Médecins Sans Frontières has reported that its staff is trapped inside the hospital with hundreds of patients and thousands of displaced people. The death toll continues to rise, and UN officials are concerned about the potential for disease and starvation. In conclusion, the situation in the Middle East remains highly volatile and dangerous. The involvement of various countries and the escalating tensions between the US and Iran raise the likelihood of a direct confrontation. The international community must work together to find a peaceful resolution and ensure the safety and well-being of those caught in the crossfire. Now, I'd like to hear from you, our viewers. What are your thoughts on the situation in the Middle East? Do you have any ideas or suggestions for a peaceful resolution? Let's discuss. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.